Hello everyone and welcome back to Destiny. As the release of Lightfall approaches, we've been learning a lot more about the upcoming changes and additions to the game. Today we got a ultimate deep dive into Strand in the form of both a shiny new trailer showcasing all of the Strand subclass abilities, along with a developer blog post that breaks it all down in great detail. A lot of what we've been speculating in previous videos has been confirmed today, and it has me seriously wondering if Strand is going to become the sweatiest subclass in Destiny. Let's jump in and break it all down. Alright, the footage before you is the new trailer. I'll put bits of it and slow them down as we talk about the various new abilities. So let's start off with the different terms. First, we have an object that you can weave and interact with in various ways called a tangle. You can think of them as Warmind Cells 2.0. They are these balls of strand that are created when enemies affected by strand are defeated. They will unravel them, which disconnects their life force from the weave, leaving them in a tangle. Tangles can be shot by guardians, causing an explosion that damages nearby enemies. It can also be picked up and thrown at other enemies as well. Once a tangle is flying through the air, you can actually grapple onto it and have it carry you with its momentum. Then we have the 3 strength debuffs, starting with Suspend. A suspended PvE enemy is lifted off the ground for a brief duration and is essentially disabled. In PvP, suspended players are lifted off the ground but can still move, albeit slowly, and fire their weapon to fight back. And this was confirmed later in a developer interview that this is only firing from the hip. You actually are not able to aim down sights while you're suspended in PvP, so keep that in mind. Next up is Unravel. Attacking an unraveled enemy will cause threads to burst out of the target and attach to nearby enemies. Once hit, that target is also unraveled. Next we have Sever. A severed enemy is less capable of affecting the material world, reducing their damage output as a result. I think Sever is low-key going to be one of those things that might make a huge difference in the day 1 raid. Reducing the enemy damage output is going to prevent a lot of deaths, so I think you might see a lot of Strand in the day 1 attempts, but we're going to have to play around with that and see if it can be one of those like really clutch, viable things to take in and consider for the day 1 raid attempt. Then on the buff side of things, we have the Woven Mail. We saw this in action in the exotic gear trailer. We saw the exotic hunter helmet granting you Woven Mail when using your grapple, and that of course grants you additional armor in addition to flinch resistance. So here we can see it's not just limited to that exotic and is in fact part of the Strand subclasses. And of course that means there are aspects and fragments that will be granting you Woven Mail, and we're going to go over those in just a moment. From there we move on to the star ability of the hour, and that is the Grapple Hook. This is one of 3 available grenades available to all classes. It can latch onto objects, players, and apparently just thin air. It propels you forward, flying you through the air. Then while you are in the air, you are granted the ability to use a flying melee attack known as Grapple Melee. This lunges you forward into the enemy, does bonus damage and unravels them and pushes them back. We saw this in action in previous gameplay trailers. The hunter latches onto the Thundercrashing Titan, then detaches and latches onto a Cabal, and then moves forward and does a devastating finisher type attack on the enemy. All of the classes have this ability, although as we'll see in a hunter aspect, that class has the ability to have 2 grenades, which is why you're seeing 2 grapples back to back here in this footage. Now before moving on to the subclasses, we got some interesting insight into the gameplay loops and concepts behind Strand. One of my concerns was that it was going to focus too much on mobility and not work well from a practical gameplay standpoint. It seems like we can put a lot of those worries to rest with the following statement from developer Kevin Yanis. Yanis says Strand really came to life for him when the team started seeing the power of the grapple when combined with the other elements of Strand. We got things like Tangles online and then started realizing the gameplay here is incredibly novel, interesting, and new when you have to do all of these quick context switches between grappling and slamming and throwing a tangle. All of these things can happen in quick succession and rewards the player for having high actions per minute, which is really not a thing we have had in the game at all before. So I love the idea of needing to be skilled and aware of the timing of your abilities and cooldowns, and we'll see that in action as we dive into the 3 STRAND subclasses. So let's start with the Warlock. We have the Broodweaver. Here is where we are introduced to another term called Threadlings, minions you can weave to track down enemies and explode, not unlike Screeps. There are various ways to spawn these Threadlings, including a shared grenade option if you don't mind switching away from Grapple. Warlocks uniquely have the ability to have Threadlings return to them if they can't find an enemy to kill. You can have up to 3 of them return back to you and condense down into a smaller form and begin orbiting your player. This is called perching. Once you start attacking a new enemy, those Threadlings will then rush back out in the field and deal damage to those enemies. The Warlock melee is called Arcane Needle, which is a chain of deadly strand projectiles that tracks enemies, damaging and unraveling them on impact. You can chain 3 of these needles together, which I have to say looks pretty darn sweet. It certainly looks very effective as well, and I can't wait to play around with it. Moving on, we've got a look at the Broodweaver aspects, beginning with Weaver's Call. On Rift Cast, the Warlock weaves 3 Threadling eggs, which hatch into Threadlings when they hit a surface. Any perched Threadlings are converted into additional eggs. Mind Spun Invocation, the aspect improves several of the Warlock's abilities, and here we can see first up it affects the Grapple. When you execute a Grapple melee, the Warlock weaves 3 Threadling eggs from the target. This is huge. That means you're going to get 3 Threadlings spawning instantly. If there's no enemies around, then those are going to perch on top of you, available for the next target. Next is the Threadling Grenade. You can consume your grenade to generate a full complement of perched Threadlings. For the Shackle Grenade, you can consume that to gain a buff, creating a suspending detonation on every kill. We get a look at this in the trailer as you can see the Warlock consuming the grenade, which then essentially grants suspend rounds. Very cool. The Warlock super is called Needle Storm. It begins by sending a barrage of strand missiles that does massive damage, then those unraveled enemies turn into an army of Threadlings that seek out surviving enemies. And here in the trailer footage we get a good idea of how many Threadlings you can actually weave, which is kind of insane. Overall, the Warlock looks to be a lot of fun and potentially super effective in PvE, and of course we'll dive deeper into Broodweaver when the game launches. Moving on to the Hunter, we have Threadrunner. They're all about the rope dart and pulling off some insane combinations. The melee threaded spike sends out a rope dart that bounces between enemies, damaging and severing them before returning to the Hunter. Each hit returns a bit of melee energy, but you can initiate a timed catch by pressing melee at the right time and refund a lot more energy. That's pretty cool. The 2 Threadrunner aspects start with Ensnaring Slam while in the air. Press the air move input to slam downwards, suspending all nearby enemies. Widow's Silk, the aspect grants an additional grenade charge. The Hunter's Grapple ability creates a persistent grapple tangle, which fully refunds grenade energy when grappled to. Hunters can use this ability to set up chains of grapple points that their entire team can use, greatly enhancing their ability to quickly move around in combat or traverse the environment. This looks like it has a lot of potential, and a lot of potential to break game modes like Gambit or Trials. I can't wait to jump in and just see what we can break. The Threadrunner culminates with their super Silk Strike. This of course we've seen in previous trailers. The Hunter weaves a rope dart that they can swing around. They can throw it at enemies with a light attack, unraveling them, or performing a 360 swing that hits all nearby enemies. You can perform more grapples while in super, and you can also perform both attacks from the air. Hunters definitely look like they have the most movement and rhythm, as you can see in the footage here. I'm really liking what I'm seeing, and I'm super happy that I'm choosing Hunter to start the Lightfall campaign. Finally, we have the Berserker, the Titan subclass. As the name suggests, their abilities focus on dealing a lot of up-close damage and ensuring you stay alive in the process. Their main tool of destructions are woven claws that deal massive amounts of damage and can also suspend enemies. The melee is called Frenzied Blade. You lunge and strike at targets, severing them. You get 3 of these charges, which you can perform in rapid succession. The aspects start with Into the Fray. Destroying a Tangle weaves woven mail onto the Titan and nearby enemies. In addition to reducing damage, this aspect also increases the Titan's melee regeneration while wearing woven mail, so more of those awesome melee attacks. Danger's Lash. When the Titan casts their class ability, the Titan will blast forward a powerful ripple in reality, suspending enemies that are caught in the shockwave's path. We've seen this in lots of other trailers before, and here we get to see it come together in a really nice gameplay loop. We start with that barricade that sends out the forward ripple, suspending the enemies in its path. The Titan then initiates the 3 melees in quick succession, severing each enemy in his path. He then lands and activates the super called Blade Fury. The super's light attack is a supercharged version of the Frenzied Blade melee attack, and each light attack that connects increases the next attack speed, which tops out after a maximum of 3 hits. In addition, connecting with the light attacks also builds energy for the super's heavy attack with each hit. With the heavy attack, the Titan hurls a pair of projectiles forward that seek out enemies, suspending and damaging them on impact. So those are the different aspects for the subclasses. From there we have the grenade options, which then include the Grapple grenade, the Threadlings grenade, which splits into 3 Threadlings when it hits the surface, and then also a Shackle grenade, which suspends and seeks out other enemies and suspends them as well. Finally, we got to look at some of the fragments. We should get lots more when the game launches to start getting an idea for some of your builds. First, we have Thread of Ascent. Activating your grenade ability reloads your equipped weapon and grants increased weapon handling and airborne effectiveness for a short time. Thread of Fury, damaging targets with a tangle grants melee energy. Thread of Finality, finishers generate Threadlings. Thread of Warding, picking up an orb of power grants woven mail. So a lot of really interesting fragments. I can't wait to see how many slots each of these aspects grant us. And while it is initially a little disappointing that we're only getting 2 aspects per subclass at launch, I was personally hoping for 3. We are going to be getting more as the year goes on, so at least there's that. So all in all, Strand looks really promising. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun, and it looks like it's going to reward skilled ability use, which is pretty cool. We're going to dive much deeper into Strand when that launches, so be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss out on that video. Be sure to like the video and let me know which subclass looks best to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.